Hello, can you all hear me? Yes, I think you can. Welcome to this session. It's the only session about AI on the main stages here at Change Now. I'm super happy to welcome you here. We've got some amazing speakers coming up. But I just wanted to test the water first. Can you put your hands up if you use AI? OK. Keep your hand up if you know that AI uses 3 times more resources than previous IT products. OK, not bad. Keep your hand up if you want to learn how to use AI more responsibly. OK, great. So why was I asking you these questions? It's because last year here at Change Now, we were saying that the electricity consumption of AI was going to triple by 2028. In fact, in some states in America, it already tripled last year. The demand did anyway. What's all this for? Big companies are investing around $1 trillion in data centers right now. Goldman Sachs just released a report which said this was for 0 ROI so far. We know also from OpenAI that over 1 million people are talking about suicide with ChatGPT, and unfortunately, a few of those people succeed after those conversations. You also may have followed what's been happening in the war in Iran, how AI is accelerating that. We are not here to depress you about all those topics. We are here to talk about how we can keep all those harms in check and make sure that AI serves people and the planet rather than exacerbating inequalities. So, who am I? I'm James Martin. My company is called Better Tech. I run trainings about frugal and responsible AI with greenIT.fr. And I'd like to thank Change Now for giving us way more time to address this topic today than last year. Really appreciate it. We've got some amazing speakers coming up for you, but the first one is, no offense to the other, is a real treat. She is the #1 authority on AI and sustainability in the world. It's Sasha Lucioni, AI and climate lead at Hugging Face, and she's going to kick us off with a keynote. Welcome, Sasha.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. I'm glad to know that you're all interested in AI. So today, we are asking the big question, who does AI serve? If I can get my slides, that'd be great. In our day and age of everyone using AI, it's really important to ask questions of who creates the AI that we use. So who does AI serve? Well, most of the AI that we use today is made by a handful of big technology companies that are creating big models using a lot of energy and a lot of natural resources and selling these models back to us. And not only are these models trained with a lot of energy, but they're also trained on a lot of data. Our data that we give to these models through the internet, through books that we write, through content that we create as human beings that is used to train these models, and then we pay for using them ourselves. So it's important to know that this is not the only kind of AI. Actually, AI has been around for over 60 years now, but this is the AI that has become the most prevalent right now, the most popular, and the most used. But what does this AI represent? And who are the people who are actually profiting from it? What we really hear about most is not the costs of AI. It's not the negative impacts. It's not the communities impacted. It's really the positive. If you read about AI in the news or in media, you often hear about artificial general intelligence, the singularity, AI going to solve all of our problems. AI is going to magically create solutions that we didn't even know ourselves that we needed. But behind all of this is a narrative that is promoted by these companies to create an AI that is as generic as possible. Because when you and I use an AI, we usually want to do one specific thing. For example, writing an email or I don't know, helping our kids with our homework. But these companies, they want to be able to do everything. They create these generic AI models, and this is why they're taking up so many resources, because they need to be big, they need to respond to any query, they need to be able to help any child anywhere in the world with their homework, write any email, and this is what uses more and more resources. But at the end of the day, they're not the only models that exist. There are lots of different alternatives out there, but most of the attention is sadly on these big models. So today, I will talk about AI's true costs in terms of environmental costs, in terms of societal costs, and in terms of economic costs. And hopefully together, we'll peel back the curtain, and we'll see that behind the promises of singularity, there are some very, very tangible impacts that we should be aware of as users of this technology. Let's start with the material, because I hear a lot people saying, well, before we used to have maps, we used to have books, we used to have all these different sources of content, websites, encyclopedias, what have you. Now we have a phone, right? A smartphone in the palm of our hand that does all of these things. So it's more sustainable, right? Because instead of having 10 different things, who even has maps anymore, right? Only pirates have maps. We only have phones in our hand, and so we might think that this is sustainable because it gives us access to all the information, but what we don't see is the cost of this dematerialization. And it's not only the environmental cost, but also the cost to our creativity and our mental capacity. So, for example, there was a recent study from MIT that showed as people use ChatGPT more and more, they actually offloaded their creative thinking and their critical thinking to these models, and they lost the ability to reflect over time because they were always querying ChatGPT. So they compared people over a couple of months, and they found that the more you use ChatGPT for these very deep, human-like tasks, the more you take a part of your brain and you offload it to the model. So it's definitely impacting the way we think, and of course it's impacting supply chains all over the world as we build more and more data centers, as we have critical minerals, we have human labor. There's a huge amount of human labor that goes into creating these models and this infrastructure, but we don't see any of this because it's all far away. The data centers are not the ones in the palm of our hand. What we have are the phones. And so it's important when we're thinking about how AI has tangible impacts to think about what is really needed to power our phones and to power our AI models that we don't necessarily see. There's also often promises of good with AI. Maybe you've heard some of them. Companies that are saying, for example, robots. Robots will help precision agriculture. They know exactly when to pick a head of lettuce. They can help small-scale farmers compete with bigger companies because they have robots doing all the work. And so this is supposed to be a net benefit, right? AI for good. But what happens to the communities of workers, especially non-documented workers, migrant workers that have been traditionally relying on this labor over time? The thing is, with this kind of labor, it's often not officially in a census. We don't have official numbers, official statistics. So on the one hand, we have potential hundreds of millions of dollars of gain in money and time, and on the other hand, we have X number of workers that all of a sudden are out of a job. And of course, the emphasis is always put on the good and very, very rarely on the bad. This might seem far away, but us as well were impacted by automation. There have been studies that show, for example, that using navigation, AI-enabled navigation saves us time. We spend less time in traffic. We have more free time. Same thing with robots at home. They can help us save time doing household chores. So we have more free time, right? But what happens with that free time? How do we use it? Because other studies that have shown that once we have more free time that's due to technology, we actually buy more things online. We're expected to work more. We're expected to produce more because at the end of the day, we all have the same 24 hours. It just depends on how we use it. And maybe AI might save some of it, but it gets reallocated. And if at the end of the day we have to work more, then it's not really free time, right? Same thing with the promise that AI is going to make our societies safer. This is a tale as old as time, Minority Report, what have you. We have these promises that AI is going to detect people, detect faces, nowadays detect emotions, detect whether we're lying or not, and that this is going to somehow make societies safer. But the cost of this is, of course, increased surveillance, both in our public lives and our private lives. And so far, there has yet to be any conclusive evidence that this actually makes our societies more safe. The evidence that does exist has shown that these algorithms, these models, are biased, that they tend to work less well on people of color, that they tend to actually reallocate police resources, for example, in districts that are already over-policed. And so what we have is this self-fulfilling prophecy that we're going to make AI is going to make our society safer, but by focusing on the resource on the places that already have a lot of, for example, policing. And so far, actually, if you look at success stories of AI, the biggest one has been selling us stuff. So many of the biggest platforms, not only Amazon, but many of the biggest e-commerce platforms use AI to do targeted advertising, to do product recommendations. And 30%, 35% of their annual revenue comes from selling us things that we weren't going to buy in the first place. Just, you go and you buy, I don't know, a pair of shoes. Well, you need socks, you need other things. Customers like you have also bought. And so if you look at the numbers, most of the money is coming through applications like this, not through precision agriculture, but from selling us things online. And in the background, we have the energy demands and the environmental impacts of data centers, notably, that have been rising, set to rise exponentially in the next couple of years. So this is really getting out of hand. And the promise is that this is going to create artificial general intelligence or solve climate change. But what most of this is used for is selling us things on the internet. But as I said, there are alternatives, and I'm going to try to be a little positive today. So talk about 3 specific things that I think that we need in order to make AI more sustainable, more socially aware, and more equitable. On the one hand, I think we need a lot more democratization. So it's great that a lot of you are here today, because we need more people who want to learn about AI, who want to participate in creating AI. We need more diverse people around the table. Because trust me, I've been at a lot of these tables of people who develop and deploy AI models, and there's a certain amount of homogeny. It's people with backgrounds in computer science. It's people who make a lot of money, who live in the global north. So we really definitely need more people around the table participating in these decisions. We need more policymakers. We need more teachers. We need more artists. We need more change makers in order to make AI representative of the values and the things that we care about, and not only a handful of people who develop AI models currently. We also need much more transparency, and I think we'll talk about it today during the panel. We need more information, because among the many frustrating things that I have to deal with on an everyday basis is people saying, well, what are the numbers? How many grams of CO2 does a Google query emit, or a ChatGPT query? How much energy are we using? And at the end of the day, we don't have these numbers. And so it's really, really hard as a scientist to be able to say this model is slightly less harmful, or this company is slightly more green than the other. And so we really need more numbers. A project that I've been co-leading for the past year is called AI Energy Score. What we did was we tested hundreds of open source AI models to measure the energy that they use, and we created these very easy to interpret scores so that people who aren't specialists in sustainability or actually in AI, it's like an appliance, right? You know how energy efficient an appliance is, or an apartment building, or a building here in France. Well, you can do the same thing with AI models. And it might seem like a small difference on a per query basis, but when you use this model millions of times a day, when it's used by thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, this really adds up over time. So the model that you use as the basis of your AI tool will really make a big ripple effect across time and across usage. And finally, I think we really need more accountability. James alluded to it before. Currently, if you think about it, it's pretty wild, because big tech companies can make these tools, can sell these tools, can market these tools as the solution to mental health problems, as the solution to all sorts of societal issues, and then when they backfire, they don't take any responsibility for it. And so we've seen boycotts, we've seen protests of AI data centers, we've seen lawsuits. But we have yet to see meaningful change. And I think that at the end of the day, we don't just a small bit of text, please check the output of AI models, because for factuality or whatever is not enough. We need to see more than that. We need to see laws. We need to see also citizen pushback. And this is really starting with data centers. It's something that I work most on, environmental impacts. We're starting to see people really pushing back, saying, we don't need a data center in our community. We don't need more resource usage, more water usage. And I think that once we achieve critical mass, it's going to be easier to make change, because as users of AI, we're the ones who decide which AI tool to use and whether or not to use it in the first place. And so if enough people make this shift, then hopefully we'll be able to switch to an AI instead of having data centers that dominate the landscape, to have a true, more nature-inspired, more sustainable AI, and take back the power, pun intended, from the big tech companies and put it back into the hands of the users. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Sasha. That was a really fantastic way to take a deep dive into this subject. Now we're going to move on to a panel. So if you could join me on stage. So we've got Sasha Luciani, who we just met. Another round of applause for Sasha.
Yeah.
See here. Then we've got Tim Christofferson, who is VP of Climate Action at Salesforce. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
And we've got Theo Alves de Costa, who is partner of AI and sustainability at Equimetrics and the president of Data for Good. Oh, yes. So, thanks so much, all of you, for being here. Just to give you all a bit of context, I first got into this topic when I saw Theo give a presentation about it a few years ago, and I was like, wow, this is not going in the right direction. So thanks for that, Theo. Just to maybe explain your two roles, Equimetrics, Data for Good. What's the difference? Could you?
Sure. Hi, hello everyone. Glad to be here again at Change Now. I have the chance to be working in AI for the past 10 years, especially on sustainability issues, and I work both at a company called Equimetrics, where I develop solutions, and at an NGO, Data for Good, where I also work on, I'm more of an activist there.
Great. Thanks, Theo. Tim, you're in charge of the sustainability for Salesforce. Tell us just a bit more about that role and how it applies to AI.
Yeah, this is obviously a topic of some interest. So first of all, thanks, Sasha, and everybody who works on this topic, also from a perspective of making it better. I think it's so important that many of us lean in, especially the people who are skeptical. I think this is so important right now as we shape the future of AI, the defining technology of our time, whether we're enthusiastic about that or not. What this means for Salesforce is that we have sustainability commitments for climate change. We have, for example, a 68% emission reduction target by 2030 and 97% by 2040. We have a water program as part of our Nature Positive strategy. My team is responsible for upholding these commitments. And I have to be honest, it's a challenge at the moment because of the rapid rise and build out of AI. We don't own or operate our own data centers, which at the moment I'm quite grateful for because it's developing so fast. But obviously, as a large customer of the compute of these data centers that are mushrooming up everywhere, we have a large role in pushing our vendors and our suppliers to be more responsible and rely on renewable energy and shift away from water cooling to immersion cooling and other topics.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Sasha, your research has been, if there's any one person's research, it's been yours, which has shown us the way in terms of what's going on in terms of impact. I'm going to start with you for this first question. You mentioned quite a few points in your keynote, but if I had to ask you for just one fear about AI and sustainability, what's the one thing that keeps you up at night?
That people take this message that it's too late, the genie's out of the bottle, the toothpaste is out of the tube, like this fatalistic message I hear a lot when I speak, and even in policymakers, they're like, why should we regulate if it's already too late, if it's already, if we already have data centers being built? I think that's how we lose the battle, and so that's why I keep pushing back against this one-size-fits-all, bigger is better approach, because there are other ways of doing it. I'm not saying stop AI, but I think that we can diversify AI in a way that's more sustainable.
Okay, great. We'll come back to that. Tim, what's your biggest fear? Is it I mustn't put words in your mouth, but you're an American company. The American president is not particularly climate friendly. Does that crystallize into, does that make things difficult for you right now?
My biggest fear is actually that AI makes us lazy and intellectually not curious enough. That's my biggest fear. It's something we start to see. Obviously, we also have a lot of hope in AI, but that's a fear that we have to, I think, watch, all of us.
Good point. Theo, what's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear right now is about the link between AI and fossil fuels. What we see is that the speed and the size is unprecedented, and to meet that speed, companies have to rely a bit more than they were before on fossil fuels, and especially gas turbines that are now put just next to the data centers, and that causes so much pollution, like local pollution and also emissions, that it's becoming a problem. And it's a personal fear as well, because my mom is actually living in the US, close to a meta data center that is being built, that is supposedly to be the biggest in the world, called Hyperion. And just now, they just announced that they will put 5 gigawatts of gas turbines next to the data center, which is like twice the size of the Fessenheim nuclear power plant in France, for example. So just as a way of understanding that, and that's so polluting in an area that's already called and nicknamed the Cancer Alley, close to New Orleans in Louisiana. So yeah, that will be my biggest fear.
That's the one that's going to be, it's not going to be as big as Manhattan, but it has been superimposed on the map. It looks as big as Manhattan. Can I maybe sort of twist that, come straight back to you and ask you for your hope? Can you, in that sort of context, where do you find hope?
I think my hope is that people start to notice. It's now not easy to pretend that it's going to be actually helpful to save climate in a way. I'm all dressed up because I have a hearing at the French Senate just this afternoon to actually talk about that. And I think even like at the last Senate hearing, people from the Mistral AI company, so the French AI company, just said that yeah, we cannot pretend anymore that it's going to help climate in any other way. So now that it's out, and it's not us saying that, but actual AI companies, it's actually clear that the solution will not be there. So that's kind of a hope, I'd say. It's maybe an ironic hope.
Mindsets are starting to shift.
Yeah.
Okay, Tim, what's your hope?
I get a lot of hope from the people we work with who are using this technology already for good, whether or not it will save the world. But there are a lot of NGOs that we work with. I'll give you just 2 examples. Good 360 is an NGO in the humanitarian field that delivers, after disasters like earthquakes or wildfires, supplies to those most affected. And because we help them set that up on an AI platform, they deliver those goods twice as fast now. There's no more mess up of who gets the blankets and the water and the food. And they've saved 20% of their carbon emissions in their logistics. Another example is a conservation NGO we work with called RARE. They built a smallholder farmer app on WhatsApp in Colombia to nudge farmers to take the right decisions, to inform them of extreme weather events, to all keep them informed and build a joint vision for restoring an entire landscape. So these use cases are possible. We are not exploring them yet enough because often NGOs can't afford this technology. They don't have a chief innovation officer, but we all need to lean in and support, especially the NGO community, to use this technology for good. Because otherwise, as we heard from Sasha, most of it will be used to sell us more things, and that's not good enough, I think.
Thanks, Tim, for those examples of AI for good. I always insist that AI is only for good if its benefits measurably outweigh its impacts, and those seem to meet those criteria. So thanks for that. Sasha, where do you get your hope from when you wake up every morning?
When I look at my plants. No, I'm joking. I work a lot with...
Not butterflies.
Not butterflies,
No.
yeah, butterflies give me lots of joy. I work a lot with the developer community. So Hugging Face, the company I work for, is a big platform for sharing open source AI models. And when I joined almost 5 years ago, it was a relatively, like sustainability and energy were a relatively niche consideration. And now I see more and more developers, for example, developing smaller models, more frugal and efficient models, thinking about what region of compute they'll choose. So I really see the people developing AI, like the, the geeks behind the computer screens, thinking about this more and more. And I think that it's going to take bottom-up decisions, so by these developers, and also top-down decisions, like by the people using the technology. And so hopefully we'll meet halfway and make a positive change.
Good news. The first time a few years ago I spoke to a developer colleague about, it was actually about, oh, I've just found out that these languages, these coding languages use less energy than others. He said, greenwashing and bullshit.
Yeah.
And that plus Theo and other things got me, like, I'm going to prove you wrong. It's good to see that their mentalities are starting to change too. Coming back to, I want to focus now a bit on data centers because, as you mentioned, Sasha, one of the things that we've really started to see this past year is local communities in the USA rising up and saying, not in my backyard. And it's not NIMBYism, it's like they are saying, what is the point in this? There's an organization that has put a value of $100 billion on these projects that have been stopped. Would you say that that proves that people power uprising is the best way to limit the excesses of big AI?
I think that people power is definitely currently the biggest mechanism for change that we have. But it's interesting because I think people are realizing that data centers are kind of a global or a very distributed benefit, but a very local cost. And before that, it wasn't as clear. I remember talking to some like deputy minister in Canada a couple of years ago, and they were like, yeah, this company wants to build a data center in whatever region, and they're saying that it's going to drive local startups, local innovation. And I was like, do you think the startups is going to like physically like connect themselves to the data center? Like, how do you see this happening? I think now we're starting to see that it costs water, energy, greenhouse gases locally, and the benefit is, anyone can use the data center anywhere in the world, presumably. And so I think that that's something we need to reflect. Instead of giving them tax breaks, for example, it should be taxing them more. Actually, in Quebec, the Canadian province where I live, the local power utility decided to tax data centers twice as much as other big clients like factories and things like that because it's such a strain on the local grid. And it's actually pretty encouraging to see that not only do we have people power, but we're starting to see like governments participating.
Yeah, and big tech companies saying it's okay, we'll pay the bill.
Yeah.
But then they also say things like it's going to create jobs.
Yeah, which is pretty false. I think it's maybe a couple of dozen jobs in the long term that are created.
So those are the sort of, if you hear we're building a data center, it's going to create jobs. Don't believe him. It's not true. Even Microsoft's own lawyers admitted that's not true. I enjoyed that one. So we know this is happening in the US. Theo, what's happening in Europe? I know Data for Good is helping one local community in France to push back against a project in Wissous. Yeah. Can you tell us more about that?
In France, we see that there are like around 60 data center projects coming up in the next years. That means that if you live in France, you will have a data center in your backyard in the next years if those projects comes into fruition. We already have 300 data centers in France. And we definitely have some good assets for having data centers in France. We have a surplus of clean electricity. We have like a water system, water network that works probably well. So we don't have the same like drawbacks that as we would see in the US. Still, we still see that France is now promised as a land of opportunity for data centers, and that raises many questions for our community that lives around there. For example, one reason is that it would, at some point, one of the arguments that is being pushed is that if we'd had the compute capacity in France, it would bring sovereignty because we'd have our own capacity, our French capacity. But what we see is that this is actually a way for American tech companies in particular to set up stone into those places. And for example, in Wissous, that is in the north of France, there has been a data center for Amazon that is being built, and they find a way to go around all environmental laws by cutting their project into pieces and declaring projects one part after the other. So right now, I just put my name, and we had the trial last week, and we are waiting for the audience to give us reason or not with the multiple NGOs and people working there, people living there, to see that it actually was illegal environmentally and locally and democratically to set up a data center there, and especially because it's Amazon that does not at all bring any more sovereignty to France than what it was. So that's why we're doing that right now.
And the crucial thing there, and this might be useful for other people who have, thank you, Theo, who might have data centers going up in their backyard, is you can't tell. You don't know that it's Amazon because they do it, they hide behind another company, and then they have and then at the last minute, they have what I call the Scooby-Doo moment. Hey, it's Amazon, and then people go, shit, what do we do now? So yeah, they are used to hiding their tracks, right, which makes it even harder for sort of work you're doing.
Yeah, and for example, the data center where my mom lives in New Orleans, Meta just nicknamed it Project Sugar, which in a way it's terrifying for me. And yeah, that's why there is a big question in bringing that knowledge to everyone, because right now what we see is that whenever you stop a data center for different reasons, and sometimes maybe there's no reason to be stopped. Not all of them are bad, we could say that. And if one is stopped, maybe it will appear in another region. For example, in the Netherlands, there has been a big pushback by communities to refuse data centers there, and it actually appeared now in Spain with the same kind of logic, and now people are trying to fight back in Spain for the same project. So there is a big importance in communicating those data, facts, and knowledge about all this so that people know what happens when a data center is next to your home.
So we've got Scooby-Doo and Whack-A-Mole. It's going to pop up somewhere else. Okay. Tim, with the thinking about the data center context, how does Salesforce make sure that AI projects are socially beneficial? What's the sort of, how do you keep an eye on that sort of thing?
I want to first come back to Sasha's point earlier about the generic models and these large energy and water-hungry models. So at Salesforce, we have a 3-pillar strategy to approach this. The first is smart demand. We need to educate our customers, but also all of us, about using the right models for the right task. Should we ask ChatGPT what we should have for dinner tonight? No. Open a cookbook.
Use your brain.
Use your brain. And the same goes for companies. We have a lot of customers who come to us and say, oh, we want a large language model. Everybody has one. But it's like, I like the analogy that AI is like transport. It can be so many different things to so many people, from walking to taking a bicycle to taking a spaceship. And right now, the large language models are giving all of us free rides in these fancy airplanes that they've built. And that costs a lot. So everybody, when they come to us and say, oh, we want a large language model, but they need it to go to the post office every day and go back, you don't need an airplane for that. You need an electric bicycle. So we advise our companies build a small language model that use ours, which are usually the small language model only trained on the data you actually need. The second part of our pillar is efficiency. So we're driving the efficiency gains. We have to be careful here, though, because efficiency gains can be eaten up by Jevons paradox. You make something cheaper, people are going to use more of it, and then you lose that resource gain that otherwise, people are just going to use it more. The third pillar is clean supply, and this comes to your point and your question, how do we work with our suppliers? We make them sign a sustainability exhibit, so our suppliers have to have a Paris-aligned climate target. We also work with them, even though these are not our data centers, but we've teamed up with some of the regions that are water stressed, and Paris is actually one of them, to reforest in those areas where the watersheds are that refill and replenish these reservoirs. So we've planted 9 million trees last year in 13 locations. We're happy to team up with other customers because if we don't shift sufficiently from water cooling to liquid immersion cooling and new technologies, the data center build-out is going to consume as much fresh water as the country of Denmark by 2027 already. So we have to do something about the water footprint as well, ecosystem restoration, which is my passion topic, as I was on the previous panel about restoration, is one of the tools we can use and help our suppliers and the data center builders to say we have to have a, if possible, a water positive impact on those communities.
Fantastic. And wouldn't it be great? I always feel a bit naive when I think this sort of thing, but if we did all use smaller models, we wouldn't need all these data centers, would be. Let's be honest. Sasha, moving on to, there's a very big elephant in the room with this, when we're talking about AI and sustainability. It's transparency. It's very difficult, and I hear it every day from the companies I work with that the big AI providers are not transparent enough with electricity, emissions, water, hardware. The environmental data is very difficult to get from them. Sasha, this is something you've been banging the drum about for years. You've been asking more transparency, more transparency, more transparency. It never comes. What will it take for that to change, do you think?
I think that at this point, companies, because, I mean, it's kind of like with sustainability in general. I remember being in a very dark place at a certain point about what we can do as individuals in the fight against climate change. And then the more you read about it, you realize that the individual carbon footprint was invented by big oil, that we're all kind of very stuck in these structures. And of course we can eat less meat, we can travel less, but at the end of the day we're very, very stuck in the societal and economic structures in which we exist. And I think that with AI is the same. Like, of course we can boycott one Gen AI tool or stop using another one, but at the end of the day, we need more transparency from the companies themselves, and especially other companies asking for the transparency, like Salesforce, for example, asking their suppliers to provide more information. Because as individuals, of course, we can be like, well, I'm going to stop using ChatGPT, but if a company like Salesforce says we're going to stop using, I'm not going to pick on anyone in particular, that has a very big weight to it. And of course, not only big companies, but even smaller companies saying, we're trying to choose between X company and Y company for our internal AI usage. This is a question I get a lot. How do we choose between whatever, Copilot and Gemini? We don't have the numbers. But if companies start saying, we can't adopt your technology until you give us the average per query energy use, where the water is coming from, et cetera, the more companies, governments push back as well, municipalities. I think in France this is starting. Municipalities are like, well, we can't use your tool unless you tell us exactly how many resources it's using, et cetera. So I think we need this org-wide pushback for transparency, because as you say, individuals banging the drum is not enough.
But it's like so it would be, we were talking about people power, it would be company power.
Yeah.
These companies need to get together and say, give us this, or we're gone.
Yeah.
But they're a bit locked in, aren't they? They all use Microsoft Office, they all use Google Docs. I mean, they would have to...
How many orgs would it take for them to feel the pain, right? This is kind of a question. Like, okay, maybe one company is not going to be enough, but if there's 1,000 companies that stop using Microsoft, for example, products because they're not transparent enough, maybe they're going to still... And I think that currently the message is we don't have enough demand. I hear this all the time, by the way. The companies themselves are like, we don't hear this enough. Like, no one's asking us for answers. Well...
You're the first person to ask us that. That's what they usually say.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, this never came up before. Well, I mean, bullshit, first of all. But second of all, we really need to start pushing back and being like, it's not necessarily coercive, but it's it's starting to be a certain amount of pressure.
Good. Let's be positive about that too.
I'm trying.
Theo, there is a bit of a legislative, how do I put it, delay right now, especially in the US. To what degree do you think that companies like Salesforce and others being more, or any companies being more responsible about their AI use, that can be an effective way to drive change? Similar question.
Yeah, I'll probably give one tip as we're short on time, and I think one big thing is to track the usage of AI within your company. Maybe you don't have the data about the energy footprint, but at least how people are using them, how many people are using them, how many tokens are you consuming, because that's a really big importance to tracking how reliant your company is to those new technologies. Right now, there is a big strain on the energy system because of the Iran war, for example, and
Because
of the war in Iran.
Yep.
And that because there is so much geopolitical pressure and also economic pressure on the systems. Tomorrow, the price can double because of all of those strains. So if your business starts to rely on, okay, last year I actually used it tenfold because now I have 10 times more usage in AI within my company. That's a critical function of my company. But now the price is twice as big. What happens to your company then? And so tracking that's a good proxy at least to understand your energy footprint, but that's also a good a way of understanding how reliant you are on this that is still an unstable business that can shut down in a day.
It's just, I always make a point of saying we can evaluate, we can assess, but we can't measure precisely. Or what you're saying is those evaluations are enough to know if we're going to miss our emissions targets because of AI. It is possible to know that today. We have 1 minute left. I wanted to give the last word to Tim about how your approach to AI and sustainability, what is Salesforce doing that other companies could be doing quite easily?
So we were really happy last year to launch the AI Energy Score here with Hugging Face and others because that level of disclosure does help us. We also are publishing a CRM, which is our main product, Customer Relationship Management, a benchmarking tool. I think we have to go beyond that. At some point, there has to be more disclosure also of the big models, and there has to be a standard that measures how we can compare apples and oranges across all the different parts of AI. I think what we're trying to do differently, and I hope more will join us, is to also invest in renewable energy. We're only procuring renewable energy across all our own operations, and in ecosystem restoration and climate action and compensation for those emissions that you can't avoid right now. And we believe in the voluntary carbon market as one of the key tools to do that right now while we drive down our emissions. So I would encourage all other companies to embrace those things at least: renewable energy procurement, investing in nature, in technology for climate action, and looking into more disclosure, which is where we need you also to develop this.
Great. That's a fantastic note to wrap things up on. So thanks very much to all three of you, and let's keep this conversation going. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
There we go. So I hope we've kept things as not too doom and gloomy, very solutions focused. That was the idea. You're all looking fairly cheery so far, but to keep that smile on your face, we've now got an artistic interlude with Vincent Avanci, who's a Chief Poetic Officer. Over to you, Vincent. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I dedicate my life to re-enchanting organizations with the power of poetry and to use the beauty of poetry to convey messages and to imagine possible futures. So I try to write something meaningful about AI today for you guys, so I hope you guys enjoy it. The title of the Poetic speech is called AI versus PI, the Resistance of Poetic Intelligence. Gandhi once said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." I think it's time to be not just the change, but the lasting change we want to build in the world in the name of love. You know, artificial intelligence is becoming smarter every week. So the real question is, are we? I mean, what is intelligence if it forgets a living? What is performance if we forget presence? What is scaling up if our spirits are souling down? Because AI calculates faster than us, optimizes better than us, predicts us sometimes before us, but there's one thing AI cannot do. It cannot care. It cannot tremble in front of beauty. It cannot hesitate before a moral choice. It cannot see tomorrow in the eyes of a child. That's poetic intelligence. Not decoration, but direction. Not luxury, but responsibility and sensitive creativity. Because inside the word poetry lies the words try, T-R-Y. Inside the word humanity lies the hidden letters of unity. And inside prosperity lies the magical letters in a different order of poetry. Yes, poetry may indeed be the key to a sustainable and balanced prosperity, just as poetic intelligence can actually be a form of resistance for our humanity. If AI is power, PI is purpose. If AI accelerates, PI elevates. If AI executes, PI chooses. When AI calculates, PI connects. And where AI serves targets, PI serves life. And life is not a metric, it's poetic. It's not a KPI, unless it measures our key poetic impact. Because life is the reference of our existence and interdependence. And to the living, we owe our reverence and we pledge allegiance. So, sustainability might no longer be a strategy or a score on a card. It's actually more a civilizational capability, meaning our collective capacity to remain compatible with the living over time inside the planetary boundaries. Jules Verne reminded us, humanity is intelligent not to dominate nature, but to understand it. So if technology is intelligent, let it understand before it overpowers. Because the most advanced technology remains wisdom. So innovation must evolve from, can we do this? To, should this exist? From extraction to regeneration, from performance to responsibility and decency, from profit alone to prosperity for the living as a whole. And that's the definition of what we could call soulful business, where success becomes synonymous with human progress. In other words, make poetry not war, and put harmony in your words. Because if some choose every morning the love of power, we can still choose this evening the power of love. Let me say that again. Because if some choose every morning the love of power, we can still choose the power of love. Yes, 8 billion people still capable of a positive evolution of mankind towards collaboration across the globe. So the real question is not what can AI do, but who does AI serve? Shareholders only, or stakeholders, human and non-human, present and future? Artificial intelligence may extend our power, but poetic intelligence keeps us whole and caring for each other. So let us poetize the AI before it standardizes us. Let me say that again. Let us poetize AI before it standardizes us. Yes, the next competitive advantage won't be technological, it'll be ethical. I mean, poetic intelligence. It's our sacred human touch, our infinite creative flow, our unconditional love quotient, our pure compassionate link, our genuine sense of kindness. That's what's magical with our great human potential. So let us design AI that serves humanity, the living, and the long run. And maybe could we succeed thereafter in making AI plus PI a beautiful duet. Power with purpose, technology for humanity, calculation and imagination. Because the future may need fewer processors and many more poets poets of science, poets of business, poets of politics, poets of life, so that we can continue to hope to live on a more wonderful and peaceful planet with poetic leaders and natural wonders on the rise. So to all leaders and engaged citizens, by all dreams and all means, follow your heart, and let's all create a magnificent collective world work of artistic intelligence, a higher form of AI, and may the 21st century be the era of a new human renaissance where technology serves life and poetic intelligence becomes the new dance of balance and collective abundance. Thank you, and let's do not what's easy, but what's right, so that we can still feel the love ignite us at night and the light shine in the path of our lives. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Here we go. Merci. Okay, thanks very much for that, Vincent. Now we're back for the last part of this segment, and take a seat. We're going to be talking, so we've been talking about the impacts of AI on the planet. Now we're going to be talking about the impacts of AI on our minds with Albert Mukabert, who is co-founder of Chiasma, and he's a clinical psychologist and neuroscientist. How do you manage to be all those things at the same time, Albert?
By chance.
By chance?
Things happen.
I'm saying you must have a busy schedule. So the first word that I wanted to talk to you about, Albert, here today is the word I keep hearing more and more about, which is spirals. A spiral is when someone gets sucked into a sort of delusional whirlpool. Basically ChatGPT tells them they are the Messiah, and that just sort of they get sucked down into this thing where they think they start to believe that they really are the Messiah. Is this something that you come across on a daily basis, or is it something you've had a chance to look at? Would you say it's a big problem right now? Because like OpenAI say they think it's around 600,000 users which could be affected by this sort of thing. Is that?
So it's a bit complicated. I haven't met people, but there's a reason for that. So often when we're talking about the impact of AI, we're thinking about the impact on the general audience. But as clinicians, we also have to think about people that have previous or priors on mental health issues. And there's this study that came out from a team in Stanford on these spirals, which affect mainly people that already have psychological fragilities, sometimes of delusion disorders, and a lot of people have. Sometimes when we talk about these things, we say like it's less than 1% of the population, but 1% of the population is a humongous number of people. We have to also think about the impact of AI on people that already have some sorts of fragilities. And in these cases, if you have some form of delusion and disorder, and when I say delusion disorder, it's not necessarily like full-on, blown-on delusion. It can be like some forms of personality disorders, sometimes of anxiety disorders. Then in these cases, these chatbots become what we call iatrogenic. Iatrogenic, it means it makes their pathologies worse. So we're not seeing average people, like from the general audience, chat and then convince themselves that they are messiahs. But some people that have like a predisposition or some terrain, in these cases, yeah, we are seeing more and more of these self-fulfilling prophecies. It starts with a bit of flattery, and then these AIs are programmed to be aligned with their users, and then the rabbit hole just sucks them in. And this is why this Stanford team calls them spirals, because it just spirals out of control.
But it sounds like this research is coming from the US. The last I heard about was from the UK.
Yeah, the UK.
You don't seem to. You're not hearing about it at all in France.
Not yet. I'm sure there are
Sounds like
teams that are looking into it, but it's also numbers, and it's also very related to how mental health is taken care of. And I think if you have social isolation, people that are more into tech, and in big cities that are tech cities, the prevalence shoots up naturally.
But it's also, remember, when we talked about this before, you said it's also because we're not used to, when a machine flatters us,
yes,
we're not used to, our brains don't know how to handle it, right?
Yeah,
Tell me more about that.
So this is a bigger issue, I think, with AI for the general audience, for everyone, is we are social animals. So a big part of how we function is trust, but it's also distrust. And we have this a concept that was developed by Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber that's called epistemic vigilance. I have a natural disposition to distrust other humans sometimes. If you come and tell me, listen, Albert, I have this amazing product, you take it and then you get 500 more points of IQ, I'm going to say he's bullshitting me. I'm used to that. But this epistemic vigilance, we haven't really developed it for our machines because usually our machines are trustworthy. I'm not currently worried that this microphone is changing my words and transmitting something else than what I'm saying. We're not used to distrusting. Let's say I want to buy a bed and I want to measure the room in my house to know how big the bed can be. If I take a meter and then I measure the room, I never worry that the meter might be lying to me. We don't have this natural predisposition to be wary and vigilant with our machines. And for the first time in history, we have machines where we need vigilance, which are these chatbots, because LLMs have hallucinations, they sometimes lie, not intentionally, obviously, I don't know, but probably not intentionally. But the information that is coming out is not reliable, the same way as the information from another human can be not reliable. If I take my phone out now and I open my calculator app and I put a huge number in and I do an operation, I know it's reliable. With these chatbots, it's not, and we're not used to that. So when these chatbots are going to tell people that if you're sick, do that, or you are the Messiah if we go back to the spirals, or...
Am I?
Maybe. Am I a chatbot?
Let me just ask that.
If I was a chatbot, you might believe me. But since I'm not, you'd have epistemic vigilance. Then it becomes a bigger challenge. And I think right now, in addition, obviously, to the ecological impact of AI, the biggest challenge on a psychological level of explanation is this vigilance. Because we really massively underestimate how unreliable the current versions of LLMs are. Maybe in the future they will become like a meter, like a calculator, like a thermometer. I have extreme doubts about it. But right now, even for the simplest of things, like you can ask, has James ever met, I don't know, Céline Dion, who's going to have a concert in Paris? And an LLM would probably, if you ask it a couple of times, it would probably say, yeah, they did the conference together and James sang My Heart Will Go On.
Maybe that's a prediction of the future.
Maybe it is.
Was it up the Eiffel Tower or not? I hope so.
Yeah,
anyway,
of course.
No, it is a huge change because I think it's hard to really comprehend what a massive shift in technology LLMs are. As you say, it's not just the environmental impact, which is huge, but it's also the first ever technological product where you can ask it the same question twice and it will come up with a different answer.
Yeah.
We just don't know, the black box aspect.
Yeah, and both answers could be wrong.
Yeah.
This is the worst part. It's not like one is right and one's wrong and you have to pick. You can ask it 10 times the same question and the 10 times are different and the 10 times are wrong. But since we're not used to it, we ask the question only once. And the fact that it's anthropomorphized, we have this thing we call anthropomorphization. Mm-hmm. It's very easy for us to attribute human attributes to other things. We do it a lot with other animals, with our pets, but sometimes people anthropomorphize their cars. I'm sure you know people that talk to their cars. They're like, you can do it, come on, let's go, with whatever. And now we have a machine that speaks like us, so the anthropomorphization is dialed up to max. It's a machine, so it's supposed to be trustworthy. So a human-like machine that's supposed to be trustworthy, and it isn't. It's literally like the Achilles heel of our psychological apparatus. We're really good at detecting dishonesty in other humans, but we have had zero training at detecting dishonesty in machines, and we have like the perfect storm for bad things to happen if you have some fragilities.
especially when they're trained to be sycophantic.
Yes.
Which partly explains why some people are now only talking to ChatGPT instead of going to see a mental health professional.
Yeah.
Does that worry you in your role?
I'm a bit worried and not worried at the same time. I'm a bit worried. I mean, this fact of using AIs as psychologists is quite common and an old idea. The first real chatbot, which was really a rudimentary chatbot, was called Eliza.
Yep.
And Eliza had the persona of a therapist because it was in the 60s, 70s, so we're around what we call humanistic psychology, the Carl Rogers approach. And Carl Rogers was a psychologist that developed something called active listening. And basically, you listen and then you reformulate. So you say, I feel sad, and I just go, oh, this must suck. And so Eliza used to do this really well. So when you get Eliza, a much more performant Eliza, it's not weird that people will, at some point will ask for advice. So I'm not really surprised. I'm a bit worried because since it's sycophantic and it's basically an upgraded version of active listening, it can be quite iatrogenic. However, what we're seeing in research is that if you are seeing a human psychologist, using a chatbot as an aid can actually be a good thing. So sometimes the chatbot can help you go through some cognitive restructuring, some exposure therapy, some behavioral change, as long as it's supervised by a human psychologist. So a patient would come to the practice, let's say once a week, once every 2 weeks, and then in between these sessions, you can have chatbots that are sometimes even developed for this purpose specifically, that can help guide through and apply what you've seen in therapy. So a chatbot exclusively, not a good idea. A chatbot in conjunction with a psychologist that has this approach may be a good idea in the future.
But it's never going to disagree with you, is it? And I thought we needed social friction to...
This is why you need a human aspect.
Right.
So it's more for applying, like sometimes there are some approaches, for example, in cognitive behavioral therapy, where you have exercise, like you have almost homework to do, and then the chatbot can help you manage. Chatbots can be good for quitting smoking. You have a program, it will prepare bullet points. But as soon as it is a discussion, then this flattery kicks in and it doesn't really work. You're like, I want a relationship advice. My partner did this. And your chatbot will more often than not side with you. But sometimes I'm the asshole, so it's problematic.
So you need a chatbot to agree with you and a psychologist to disagree with you.
Yeah, or a chatbot to just help you apply whatever the psychotherapy plan you're going through. Yeah.
Okay. So we're running out of time. I just wanted to make sure we focus on a more, we end on a more positive point or helpful point. If someone near or dear to me is, I think, getting sucked into one of these spirals, what's the best way to help them?
Not to be frontal with them.
Oh, okay.
We have what we call motivated reasoning. It works the same if you have someone that's extremely politicized or if you are a football fan. Like someone that we call this motivated reasoning is when you don't really care about the reasoning, what you care is the end point. And the end point of the reasoning in this case is I'm the Messiah, so it's hard to argue against it.
So it's not take the phone off them.
Yeah, no, it does, they would just cut you out of their life by another phone.
Yeah.
What would be a good approach is to teach them how to do other prompts with their chatbots. There are ways to make the chatbots less flattering. For example, a good way is to ask the chatbot to counter-argue. So ask the chatbot, can you now counter-argue that I am not the Messiah? And then you will get really good arguments that go against it. And since we trust the chatbot, there will be less defenses than when we distrust a human. If you come and tell someone you're close to, you're not the Messiah, they're going to be, you're jealous. But if the chatbot tells them, there are very low chances for you to be some sort of chosen one, like Neo from The Matrix, or Timothée Chalamet from Dune, it's going to be a bit better.
So wouldn't it be better to find a human who could tell them they're the Messiah and then gradually ramp it down?
They would probably just get out of the conversation.
Okay.
It depends how far along they are, but if they're really deep into the well, it's much better. And this is general advice for everyone. Whenever you're talking with your chatbot on something, just pause for a second and prompt it. can you now argue the exact opposite of everything we've been saying? And it does it really, 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 really well.
Okay.
And I think this is also a good general advice. Every time you do something on Gemini, on ChatGPT, on whatever, ask it, okay, now, whatever we've been saying, I want you to counter against it, like to argue against it. And every time it works in a quite impressive way, actually.
It's going to say he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy.
Yeah, or you're just not important and insignificant in the universe.
Great. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, James. Thanks.
Okay. Albert, sorry. Vincent is the last guy. Thanks. All right, that's it. Thank you very much for following us today. It's been a real eye-opener. Thank you very much to all of our speakers, and enjoy the rest of Change Now. Thanks very much.